This recording was funded by the European Union. Its contents are the sole responsibility of Man to Man podcast and do not necessarily reflect the views of the European Union. Hello everyone, good to have you again on this edition of Man to Man. I'm your host, Hugo Ribatica. Exciting show we've got in line, educating the next generation, teaching boys about consent. Is that conversation made possible by the European Union delegation to South Africa. And I've got two remarkable guests with me, Craig Wilkinson, who's in studio. Craig, really good to have you.
Good to be here. Thanks, Hugo.
And joining us via our Zoom link from Cape Town is Steph. Now, Steph, appreciate you making the time this evening.
Thanks, Hugo. Good to be here.
So let's start off with you, Craig, and the process of educating the next generation. And the reason we want to have this conversation is because of the numerous challenges that South Africa, Africa, in fact, the globe faces around gender-based violence. And gender-based violence, 16 Days of Activism, commemorated couple of weeks ago. So what is some of the work that you've been doing juxtaposed with the challenges that we're facing in this regard?
Well, we work a lot with boys and men, and our whole mission is to teach boys and men how to be good men. You know, no boy is born an abuser, no boy is born a misogynist, no boy is born a racist. You know, all of these things are learned and acquired behaviors. And so we look very heavily at the journey from boy to man. What goes wrong on that journey? So that a boy ends up a man who abuses, or a man who's any one of these dreadful things. And so we focus very much on the virtues that make a good man a man. There's a lot of false narratives around masculinity. There's a lot of false narratives around men and women in terms of the equality of their value. And so we teach and inspire and equip and mobilize and get men in dialogues to grow good men who are safe spaces and who are excellent mentors, role models, fathers, and just citizens.
But I think it's almost fair to say that a good man doesn't come a dime a dozen.
Well, I mean, innately they do. But I often compare masculinity to a vehicle. I mean, a car. It's a very sort of simplistic. But a car is a beautiful gift to humanity, isn't it? I mean, we all use cars every single day. But it's also very dangerous. You know, and unless you know how to drive a car, you're going to be a danger to the road. Many thousands of people are killed every year. And masculinity is very much the same. We got these drivers. We got a superior physical strength. We got testosterone, and these things need to learn. Boys need to be taught how to drive this vehicle called masculinity. And you can only learn how to drive a car if someone who knows how to drive a car teaches you. And you can only learn how to drive this thing called masculinity if someone who has learned, in other words, an older man who is a safe space and a good man, teaches a younger boy how to be a good man.
Or if you've made mistakes, or if you've crashed, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah, you learn from those mistakes, and hopefully they're not too destructive. So men are very good at destroying themselves. You know, 4 times more men commit suicide, and men are very good at being aggressive and destroying others. You know, and so if men innately want to be good, but they need to be taught how to be good. Same as a vehicle. You know, vehicles, they're ready to do good stuff, but they're ready to be dangerous as well. It needs to be driven well. So innately, masculinity is a beautiful gift to humanity, but it can go horribly wrong.
Steph, you're doing a lot of work in that area, and a lot of your work is around social media and engagement.
Yeah, Hugo, we run a program, the He Care program, funded by the European Union. And what we've done is we've been experimenting online with social media listening tools, the same tools that the advertising industry uses to find out what product you're likely to buy. And we found some really interesting insights into what men are saying, what they're thinking, what they're not responding to. And the other thing, of course, on social media is we're doing this at scale. So for argument's sake, we've got, over the last few years, we're working with about 45,000 men who have already spoken out against gender-based violence. And we're working with them through nudging and other behavioral change mechanisms to encourage them to continue doing what they're already doing, what they've already stood up to do. So we expect that these kind of programs can be extended further and further, and that within a few years we could be working with hundreds of thousands of men. The point being that once you can stay with them online, you have a long-term relationship with them. It's not one off, but it doesn't offer exactly the same kind of intimacy as you'd get in doing kind of one-on-one work with men in forums and that kind of thing. I think that's a very, very powerful mechanism as well. But this is an unused and unexplored area, and it's offering us a massive opportunity, and particularly in the middle of the bell curve where where a lot of men and boys they're not conscious about the kind of attitudes that they're inheriting and taking on. And there's ways and means of getting young boys and men to reflect on those attitudes and to decide for themselves whether they're going to take them on. So it's much less intense than the interpersonal one, but what it does is it gives you a massive spread. And this is what the He Care program is trying to do.
So let's talk about that information that you're picking up. What are the men saying online?
Well, they're saying everything. I mean, everything that people say in society. So this isn't only a public social media. So we can't go into social media that's not already public. But what happens is that you can track. You're looking at tens of thousands of conversations, which creates an incredible insight into what men are thinking and saying. So one of the first things we discovered is that that men are very they're kind of overexposed, or they're kind of Me Too campaign. The men are trash. There's been huge amounts of criticism of men for a long time now, and men are they shut down as soon as that kind of information, language, whatever comes to them. So we try and engage them as their best selves. So we have a very kind of a very different approach around that. The whole point is to get men to reflect and to grow, and we do that through social media.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the messaging that you're putting out there in a moment, Steph. But coming back in studio to the conversations that you're having with boys, because we are talking about educating the next generation. I suppose the first place to start would be to do an analysis of what is wrong, what are the challenges that boys are facing now, and what is it that you've come up with? I mean, what are you exposed to on the daily, Craig?
Well, I mean, boys are growing up in an environment where the big question on a boy's heart, two big questions, and he brings this question to his father when older man: am I enough? Do I have what it takes? And it's a question of validity and a question of identity. And the second question is, show me how to be a man. Show me how to be a man. Model to me what it means to be a man. And so boys take their cues from older men. And in the absence of a present biological father who's modeling good masculinity, where do they go? They go to gangsters. They go to social media. They look at men behaving badly. They might look at an uncle who's beating up his wife, or an uncle who's drinking too much. So they take their cues from older men. They want to be good men, and they look to older men to model to them what it means to be a man. So that question is, show me how to be a man. And the second question, well, the first one is am I valid? Am I legitimate? Am I worthy? Do I have what it takes? Because there's a tremendous amount of pressure on men to perform in society. I love what Chris Rock, the comedian, said. He said, only women, pets, and children are loved unconditionally. Men have to pitch up with something. And whether that's right or wrong, that's very much the narrative in society. So men feel this pressure: I need to pitch up with something. I need to be powerful. I need to be strong. So a man who grows up unvalidated in his masculinity and in his humanhood and personhood has something to prove. So he either becomes very passive, he withdraws, and he withdraws into all kinds of addictions, whether it's alcohol, sex, whatever the case may be, because in that addiction he feels powerful. Or he becomes very aggressive, and he feels a need to dominate and control. And then he takes his cues, and I love what Steph was saying. One of the big lies that men are hearing nowadays is men are trash. So men grow up with these big lies: sex, power, money, big boys don't cry, and men are trash. And I mean, that's a dreadful way to grow up. You know, the narrative is the more sexual partners I have, the more of a man I am. What a lie. It's a complete and utter lie. The more power I have, the more of a man I am.
But that's somebody's truth, because for a generation of men, it is their truth.
It is their
right?
truth. Yeah, it's a narrative they grew up with.
So suppose the question that they would ask you is, what gives you the right to change my truth?
Well, if you can point out that their truth is actually a lie, and say, you know, a true man who's able to control himself, a true man can receive the word no, a true man can be loyal and faithful and committed to one woman. That's true masculinity. And something inside every man knows that. Something that knows that. You know, and power, you say, guys, you know, power doesn't make you a man. What makes you a man is what do you do with the power that you have. Money doesn't make a man. You know, poor men can be, you know, you take a Mandela, you take a Gandhi. I mean, these are guys who didn't have any money and were great men. Why? Because they stood by their principles and their morals. And so it's not money that makes you a man. It's what you do with what you have. Big boys don't cry. What an incredible lie. You know, suicide rates are through the roof for men. And one of the big reasons is that boys and men don't share their issues. You know, you come to me and say, hey, brother, how are you doing? I'm fine, man. Meanwhile, I'm not fine, you know, and therefore I'm carrying something I don't need to. And men are trash is another lie. Men are not trash, you know. Men can behave in a very trashy way. You get toxic masculinity, you get toxic femininity, you get toxic humanity. Toxic masculinity manifests itself often in
But isn't that a case?
ways.
Isn't it a case of calling men out? Because if you do look at statistics, right? I mean, let's talk about gender-based violence statistics that are announced in South Africa every quarter. Police minister announced numbers in the region of between 11 and 13,000 every quarter of reported gender-based violence cases. Craig. Now, there's also another statistic that suggests that only 1 in 10 are actually reported.
Correct. Yeah.
So when women, not justifying it, but when women come out and say men are trash, they're looking at the statistics and they're saying that 1 out of every 3 women by the time they're 18 has experienced some form of gender-based violence. So why are you thinking about a response to that? I want to go to Steph. Steph, you know, when you obviously are quite active on social media, on the World Wide Web. Now, a lot of people don't like Twitter because Twitter is rough. They call it the streets of Twitter, or the streets of X, as it is called now. Now, how many of those opinions that you see are actual opinions, as opposed to people online that are just taking the mickey out of conversations and don't really mean what they say?
Hugo, I suppose that's the kind of distinction between mis and disinformation, whereas kind of misinformation is you're not conscious, or what you're doing, or you're joking, whereas disinformation is that there's some intent behind it. But the thing is that all of that is part of the mosaic. I mean, what Craig was talking about earlier in terms of all the issues that men face and boys face, all of those issues are real. What social media does is it gives us a platform where we can find them in most interesting and particular ways, and attempt to work with them. I mean, they obviously only want to participate if they want to, but you can find people that are already on side. So it's really around how do we change this? So the streets of Twitter, as you put, well, of X now, they are savage, but we've learned ways of there are ways of how to calm that. There are ways of how to turn those toxic conversations into some kind of reflective experience, to get people to start thinking critically. And typically it is completely counter to that kind of hypermasculinity stuff. It is, if somebody had to say something really nasty about raping a woman or about hurting a woman, the kind of response we would ask, these are voluntary dialogue activists online, would be they work with what we call dialogue decks. And a kind of a response to that might be, well, it must be horrible to feel that way. It's just completely counterintuitive responses. We've also discovered that things like truth questioning and stuff like that neutralizes toxic tweets or posts for other people who witness it. So there are lots of techniques that are possible. there are a huge amount of there are more people, good people online than there are problematic people, and they watch and they're there and they raise their hands and you can find them and they can become activists online, digital activists in whatever field is their interest. So that's really where we are, what the He Cares program is about, and we're trying to do that with all sorts of civil society organizations, because what it does, it amplifies their impact considerably.
I like what you say about amplifying those voices, but how do regular men get involved, men that aren't necessarily activists? And I think for me, that's where the crux of the matter is, right? That young men or young boys are more likely to listen to some individuals who aren't necessarily activists, but are their role models, right? So how do we get regular folk that believe what you and I believe in, which might be issues around teaching boys about consent, teaching boys or educating the next generation? How do we get those people involved to speak, to retweet or pass on those messages or speak the right language?
Okay, well, the first thing is you've got to understand the language they're speaking. You've got to be able to speak in their language, right down to dialect, right down to slang, different kinds of slang and that kind of thing. So you've got to meet people where they are. The thing is that, as Craig pointed out, within everybody, even men who are violent and who practice gender-based violence, there's something in them that doesn't like what they're doing. For many men, it's they hurt the very people they love the most, and they sit with this torment of being violent men. So the real critical space that we try and open up is discussion amongst men around that, and we do that through various ways on various platforms, and eventually land up in some kind of closed Facebook pages where men are comfortable to talk about their feelings and the problems they're having in managing their own emotions. And it's the other thing we're learning from social media is that there's a lot of intersectionality between, let's say, for argument's sake, gender-based violence and bullying and other violence. Often it's the same person. And there's now a lot of information coming out about how head injuries help men who suffer head injuries have a greater propensity of being violent in their lives. There's a high likelihood that people who are violent in the world today, and let's not forget we're killing between 10 and 8 of our brothers for every woman we kill. That is from injury in life, that is from deficits in childhood and in nurturing and stuff. And these are things we can do something about. The other thing we also understand more clearly is how we transfer intergenerational attitudes or tolerance of things like misogyny, and how there are mechanisms available in society to look at that in a critical way and say, well, there are other things that we culturally take forward, and which ones are important to us and which ones aren't important. And for many people, for many men and boys, it's just they're not brought to think about that. And what we try and do online is we try and mostly through questioning, we try and bring people to think about that, and we try and address them in a way that they are responsive to that in a language, and then there are many different layers of media that you can do as well through social media. So it's a kind of you try and affect the whole environment. It's very new. We haven't found anybody else doing this anywhere else in the world, and there's a lot of excitement getting generated by this kind of methodology. And maybe these tools can be used for social healing.
Makes a lot of sense, and I like something that Steph said there. He says, meet people where they are. So you've obviously got that issue around men are trash to respond to. but also to talk about the work that you're doing
Mhm.
and meeting people where they are.
Absolutely. Steph, just to say, I love what you're doing. I think it's absolutely tremendous. So the men are trash. It's a very understandable backlash to a dreadful human rights violation, but it's very simplistic and it's very counterproductive. That's the problem. It's simplistic in the sense that, are you saying that men are innately, biologically flawed and faulty and trash? And clearly not. Men are approximately 50% of the population. And so we're not innately wrong or bad. We need to ask a deeper question and ask, why are men behaving like this? What's causing it? And Steph rightly said, much of it is childhood trauma and it's wrong modeling. So let's rather fix that. Let's not, a very easy way is to say, you're all trash, And what that does actually, when I say it's counterproductive, is it makes men worse. A man who is behaving badly and who carries the trauma of being a violent man, or his own trauma and the guilt and shame of it, if you call him trash, he's likely to be worse. So if our goal is to stop gender-based violence and stop violence, we need to cut out the simplistic nonsense. And we need to say, let's call out the good in the man. Let's heal the trauma. Let's absolutely hold them accountable for wrong behavior. And there has to be accountability. We're not saying it's okay. It's never justifiable. And that's why I say that a reason is not an excuse. We can never excuse this kind of behavior, but we have to understand it. And only by understanding it can we actually fix it. To answer your second question, meeting where they're at is absolutely vital. We run conversations in colleges, schools, universities, taverns, communities, poor and rich communities, companies, parastatals, and you have to be able to speak the language. And when I say language, not just the vernacular, but the actual cultural nuances of that particular group of people. You might have slang in a particular area of Cape, which is not used in KZN. And the kind of cultural influences and the kind of reality that people, you have to be able to understand that.
So does this mean then that you have to engage or employ individuals to work with you that are from those
100%,
communities?
100%. You and I can't breeze into the community we have no knowledge of at all. What we can do, and this is what we do, is we take men from that community, work with them, mentor them, equip them, train them, inspire them, and then they go back into their communities and they're able to interpret the principles of what we're teaching into the cultural specifics of that particular community. And that's vital. And you see, men need to be heard. A lot of what we do is, and also as Steph rightly said, when we look at violence, approximately 7 times more men are murdered than women. And so we highlight, they're both terribly wrong. We tend to say it's worse when a man murders a woman because of the imbalance of power there. And generally, and often it happens in a situation where this is your loved one. This is the man that you've trusted with your life, and he betrays you in this terrible way. But the reality is it's all human rights violations, and we need to fix all of it. And we need to get to the root of what's causing all of this, and let's fix it.
Let's talk about that, because I want to move a little bit away from what we should be doing to what we are doing.
Right.
And I say this because you've got your feet firmly on the ground. There are interventions that you've been carrying out for several years, Craig. So let's answer the question: are men angry? If they are, why? And I'd imagine that many women out there want to know, as much as we do, men, how do we fix that?
Well, it's not a quick fix, unfortunately. It's not an overnight. There's no silver bullet. I mean, the kind of work that Steph's doing is fantastic because you're dialoguing with men in a way that's calling out the champion in them. You see, if you beat a man over the head with a stick and say you're bad, he's going to be worse. If you say to this guy, look, dude, the way you're behaving is not okay. You know that, I know that. But inside you, there's a champion man. How do we call that out? So I say to young boys at school, teenagers, I say, in your DNA is a rich heritage of heroism. You are made to be a hero. And so how do we become the hero? That appeals to boys and men. They want to be heroes. And so if you teach them how to be a hero, what happens is the bad falls away, because doing the bad is a result of anger. And to answer your question, men are angry. Men are very angry. A lot of them, they feel let down by government, by family, by society, by inability to work, by fathers that are not present. There are many, many reasons why men do feel angry. The expectations level on them, the expectation of society that you can't cry. We say that men need to be vulnerable, they do, but society demands that they're not. We're living in this very schizophrenic society in many ways. So there is anger, And this is a response to anger and woundedness. And fixing it requires growing male role models, listening to men, creating platforms where men can share and be heard and be understood, held accountable, not justified bad behavior, but heard and then taught what true, authentic, good, safe masculinity is.
So let's look at the statistics around broken homes or single parent headed households, right? Because the biggest problem, and I think we talked about this off here, is that many boys aren't raised by their fathers or aren't raised by good men. What is that statistic, and how do we? Because it paves way for my next question.
Look, the stats are that upwards of 60% of children are growing up without a present engaged father. 60%. So that's a very high percentage.
So how do we remedy that? At least start the process.
Fathers are absolutely crucial, both to boys and girls, and we need to have policies, government interventions, societal-based interventions that pay a lot more attention to the importance of the role of the father, reward that, encourage it, inspire it, teach it, and start challenging men to rise up and be mentors and role models and fathers. Look, we have generations of woundedness, of broken homes, stemming way back to migrant labor, single-sex hostels, the whole apartheid system, and that stuff's not fixed overnight. That we need to restore fathers, role models. We need more men in teaching, in primary school teaching, way more men, because a lot of kids come from a single mother's household, and let's shout out to single moms. They're heroes. But as a father, I cannot teach my daughter how to be a woman. I can't. My wife cannot teach my son how to be a man. Society needs both men and women teaching both boys and girls everything that is about great humanity and great masculinity and great femininity. And that's the route we need to go.
So when we talk about, do we create structures, social structures, where men can go out and assist women or assist boys in becoming good men or better men?
I think we need to. I think we need to create mentorship programs where, look, you and I as adult men also didn't arrive at adulthood whole. We all have our own challenges and issues and trauma, to a variety of extents. So processes and structures whereby we acknowledge that and we provide healing and refathering for men and equip them and provide structures and processes by which those men can then help younger men. Programs like Boy Scouts, it's a brilliant program, all of these programs can obviously be abused, but they're brilliant because it's a structure where men are teaching younger boys good things about masculinity, how to use their strength for good and never for bad, not to be passive, to step up and stand up and take it on the chin in a good way so that they can be a safe space, so that they, I'm rambling on a bit, but yes, we do need structures and we do need incentives and we do need everything possible to restore men to be good mentors.
So when we talk about the biggest challenges that you face in your work, you speak to boys and you are trying to convince these boys that what they're doing isn't right. What is a pushback? Because I'm sure not every single boy will say to you, "That's all right. Thanks, Mr. Wilkinson. I agree with you." There's some they're going to push back and say, I like what I'm doing. I like being a bad boy.
Very few. You'd be absolutely blown away and encouraged by how many boys want to be good men. And
even in the roughest of communities?
Even in the roughest of communities. Look, you take the Cape Flats where gangsterism reigns. Boys join a gang. This is Denzel Washington said, boys join gangs because they don't have a gang called the family with a leader called the father. And there's so much truth in that. Boys join gangs for a sense of belonging, validity, and they are asked to do things that completely freak them out, completely go against their value system as an initiation to join the gang. They'll be asked to go and murder someone, and they do that, but they hate doing it. And a lot of men hate themselves for the things that they do. They don't want to. They know what's right, in society, you'll get your small percentage of psychopaths and just bad apples, tiny percent. But the vast majority of men and boys want to be good men. And they kind of know what it means, but there's this peer pressure, like the gang. The gang's an extreme example. That's pushing them into behavior that they know is wrong, but they're doing it to be accepted. And so the message of true, authentic, good servanthood masculinity resonates with most boys I've chatted to and most men I've chatted to. The pushback is very limited. The pushback is, right, Craig, you say that, but I'm unemployed. You say that, but I'm going home to maybe an abusive situation. I'm being verbally, my situation doesn't allow that. You're saying this to me, but society doesn't reward that. Society doesn't reward me being vulnerable. It rewards me being tough. So that's why we need to really have a nationwide movement towards true, authentic masculinity, and it's going to resonate with the vast majority of men, and because they want that.
Before we let you go, what's your clarion call to men today?
You're designed to be a gift to the world. Be that gift, but the choice is yours. You can choose to be a gift to the world or a curse. You're also designed to be dangerous. And women get a bit upset when I say it initially. I say, never dangerous to women, never dangerous to children, never dangerous to each other's brothers. But as men, we are designed to be dangerous to whatever threatens women, children, society. Racism, prejudice, corruption, misogyny should fear masculinity, because masculinity should be dangerous to those things. So be good, be dangerous. You're designed to be a gift.
Craig Wilkinson, thanks so much for coming onto the show. Big thank you to Steph Nell, who joined us via our video link from Cape Town. And a big thank you to the European Union delegation to South Africa for making this possible. Another conversation on Man to Man. Look forward to seeing you again at the very same time next week. Let's do good.